Hello, and welcome to GBH Amplifies, the Bay State Banner. I'm your host, Ron Mitchell, editor and publisher of New England's Bay State Banner News. We are here today at the Boston Public Library's News Feed Cafe, which is GBH's wonderful studio right here in Copley Square. And today we are going to celebrate Women's History Month as we look forward to, yes, we can applaud that, yes, Women's History Month. Thank you, thank you. And as we move forward to celebrate our Women's History Month and we look towards the 250th anniversary of independence of our nation, we're going to focus on the National Women's History Alliance 2026 theme, leading the change, women shaping a sustainable future. And today, in this celebration of Women's History Month, we have our very special guest, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here.
So, for those who don't know this wonderful Congresswoman's record, I'm going to give you a little outline. The Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley grew up in Chicago, and she graduated from Boston University. After leaving the university, Congresswoman Pressley worked in the district offices of U.S. Representative Joseph P. Kennedy. That's the senior. He's actually the second, but he's the older as opposed to the younger. She then went on to work in various roles, including political director for the U.S. Senator John Kerry. We can applaud that. Mm-hmm. In 2009, Pressley was elected in an at-large seat to the Boston City Council, becoming the first black woman ever to serve in their ranks. So that was quite an accomplishment. After she was elected the first time, she sought election 3 more times, and each time she was the top vote getter among all of the candidates for the at-large seats. So congratulations on those wonderful accomplishments. While at the City Council, she was an advocate for women's rights and the rights of girls, of course, and a champion for services for them as well as increasing services for all, focusing on community empowerment and support for our immigrant neighbors. In 2018, she defeated longtime Congressman Michael Capuano, that's Michael Capuano, in the Democratic primary in the 7th Congressional District. This was a rare upset for an incumbent member of the House in this state or any state, so that was quite a feat, so congratulations. In our House of Representatives, Pressley has become an outspoken progressive and a member of the squad, joining other young Democratic members of color with similar politics. As she did on the City Council, she has been a vocal advocate for the rights of all Americans, with an emphasis on women, girls, and all of those our government systems have left struggling. She is currently serving on the House Committee on Financial Services, as well as the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. And I want to give her a huge round of applause for joining us, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley.
Thank you, thank you.
So, how are you doing today?
Well, it's good to be here. You know, I have to say at a moment when, you know, Massachusetts really represents every day the things that this hostile administration is actively working to degrade. It's an anti-freedom agenda. They want to control what books you read, what you do with your body, attack the free press, attack free speech. Massachusetts represents everything that they're against. They are anti-innovation, anti-science, anti-public health, anti-immigrant, anti-woman, and certainly anti-black. So I just want to commend you for this convening and everyone who's here today, because this is the work of defiance. We have a dictator in the Oval Office. The only way to beat a dictator is with defiance. And this in and of itself is an act of defiance, that we are affirming the importance of libraries, that we are affirming the importance of the free press, that we are affirming the importance of black press. So hand clap yourselves.
Well, thank you.
It's going to take a lot more of that to get us to the other side. So I'm doing okay. I'm nursing a little bit of a cold.
Okay. Well.
But other than that, I'm doing well.
Well, you look wonderful as always. Thank you so much for being here. So I want to start by talking a little bit about your upbringing in Chicago and how those experiences in your upbringing prepared you for the times that we are currently in. Can you share with us a little bit about your upbringing and how your family and that process emboldened you and empowered you?
Well, first, let me just start with the city that raised me. You know, I like to say Chicago's a city that raised me, Boston's a city that changed me. It is relevant that I was raised in Chicago because I consider myself to be a community child of Harold Washington and Jesse Jackson. I grew up in a place where I saw representation at every level of government. Of course, ultimately, we went on to elect Carol Moseley Braun as a United States Senator. The first campaign I ever worked on was at the age of 10 to elect the first black mayor in the city of Chicago, Harold Washington. And certainly the work of Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Push Coalition, those have all informed how I organize, how I agitate, how I mobilize, how I movement build. So that blueprint of a true rainbow coalition and of speaking truth to power. But of course, your parents are your first teachers, and I had extraordinary teachers in my mother and my father. Now, my mother raised me alone while my father was battling substance use disorder and was incarcerated during my formative years. And that was an education because not only was my mother a super voter, a proud Democrat, a community organizer, I was receiving an education based on the indignities and injustices that my parents both navigated. My father is a brilliant man who should have had access to on-demand, culturally competent treatment. His addiction should not have been criminalized. That being said, while he was incarcerated, because of things like Pell Grants, he achieved great things. He attained 2 advanced degrees while incarcerated, came out, earned a PhD, became an assistant dean of a college, and ultimately a published author. And so his lived experiences were a great education for me about the impacts of policy, both where it can be policy harm and policy violence, and that his substance use disorder was criminalized, but also the transformative power of policies like Pell Grants and the impact of education in his life. But I also saw the discrimination he experienced coming out. So that has formidably shaped my criminal legal reform agenda and the work that I do of successful reentry, family reunification, my work of abolishing qualified immunity, and so much more. My mother, because she raised me alone and I'm an only child, shout out to all the only children, I'm very fortunate in that I did receive an education early on and that I saw my mother's humanity. A lot of children have to become an adult before they see their parents just as people. And my mother shared with me every heartbreak, every hardship. And so my mother would come home from work and talk about men, mostly white men, that she trained that were promoted over her and paid more. My mother told me as a latchkey kid, being home by myself as young as the age of 5, don't tell anyone that you're home alone because they'll take you away from me. My mother shared with me the debilitating pain of uterine fibroids and how she felt gaslit by a healthcare system that delegitimized or denied her pain. My mother also went back to work too early after a radical hysterectomy and collapsed on the street and had to have an emergency hospitalization for that. Those examples, why was I home alone? Because my mother couldn't afford childcare. Why did my mother go back to work before she was fully healed? Because she didn't have paid leave, right? Why were, despite the many jobs my mother worked, were we still constantly being met with eviction notices and repossessions? Because she wasn't being paid according to her worth, right? Why did she suffer needlessly for so long with uterine fibroid pain? Because of the systemic racism within our healthcare system, right? So those experiences have also shaped my policy priorities, how I lead and why I fight so hard. So the city of Chicago, my mother Sandy, my father Martin, I had great teachers in all 3 of them that have shaped who I am as a woman today, but also shaped who I am as a leader.
Well, that is wonderful examples. Yes, we can applaud that. That is a wonderful example of how your life experience prepared you. When you got to Boston University, what was the elements of that experience and how did Boston change you and that education change you? And I was going to ask you, when did you decide to be in politics? But it sounds like your upbringing there was no choice. That was just where you were chosen to do that from a young age, it sounds like.
Well, okay, a couple things about that. I did think I was very sickly as a child, suffering from asthma and other things, and I loved my pediatrician, and so I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And then at an early age, I just, because I've always been older than my years, I sort of did an internal audit, and I said, you're struggling in science over here. What do you already do well? And I had an awareness that when I spoke, whether it was in church, whether it was at student assembly, that people listened. So I had an awareness of that and the power of that. And I sort of set myself on a path early on that I wanted to build myself up, that I wanted to nurture my God-given gifts in the work of liberation, in the work of justice. Now, my first coloring books were produced by the Chicago Defender.
Okay, so.
And so I was coloring in afros and kids with fists raised saying nation time. And so I get it honest. And my mother also made it clear she had an expectation. She said to me, Ayanna, to be black is a beautiful thing and something to be proud of, but you've been born into a struggle. And I have an expectation that you will do your part in that struggle, in the work of liberation for black people and all marginalized people. And I was only 10 years old. So I have to say there was an expectation placed on me early on. And then I just set about on that path. So I was often elected or appointed to the leadership positions. That continued when I came to Boston to attend Boston University, to major in political science, ultimately being president of my college, and then pursuing an internship with Congressman Joseph P. Kennedy II, ultimately earning that internship. But I have to say, even that experience, the things that I took away from that, one, working in the Roxbury satellite office of Congressman Joseph P. Kennedy II as an intern and then later as an aide, I saw when people would cross the threshold, it was an education into the power of a congressional office, the power of congressional letterhead, the power of constituent services, that at the age of 21, I can make a phone call and intervene and mediate and stop someone's lights from being turned off, stave off a foreclosure. But I also was a sightline into the ways in which policy, although well-meaning, can have unintended consequences. So the people that were crossing that threshold that I met as an intern or as an aide, they were sort of falling through the cracks of a lot of well-meaning policy, but they were also victims of policy violence like redlining, as an example. So that was an incredible education as to the power of a congressional office, the power of policy. But because I'm me, I have to tell the whole story and say, I also am a survivor of a near decade of childhood sexual abuse and also a survivor of campus sexual assault. And those experiences have formidably shaped the work that I do for survivors' justice, the work that I do to combat and treat and address childhood trauma in every way, shape, and form. So Boston University was an incredible tutelage, both as a student leader, as a young black woman, and also as an intern. The other thing is I worked 3 paid jobs to do that unpaid internship. And I don't wear that as a badge of honor because I think resilience is overrated, especially when it comes to black resilience. It's born out of great hardship. But I'm very proud of the fact that because of campaigns that I supported, like Pay Your Interns, now interns have to be paid a living wage in the House of Representatives, in the United States Senate. It was true for the White House as well until the current administration rolled that back. But prior to that, those opportunities were reserved really for the kids of donors. And the reason I'm naming that is because that meant a lot of young people were not getting access to the political process and weren't being put on a path to lead and to contribute. Now, I interned, but the fact of the matter is experience doesn't pay the bills. So I worked 3 paid jobs to do that unpaid internship to today now be the Congresswoman for that very seat. At the time, that was the 8th congressional, but because of redistricting and that we had lost 2 seats, the seat that I occupy today, representing the Massachusetts 7th, is the seat, the very office that I served in as an unpaid intern, working those 3 paid jobs, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And this is also the seat that was previously held by John F. Kennedy. So when I say that I am my ancestors' wildest dreams on steroids,
You mean it, yeah.
I don't know that even they could have forecasted that a bald, unapologetic black woman would ever succeed in a seat previously held by John F. Kennedy.
A brilliant, bald,
Thank you.
non-apologetic black woman. Well, we are so thankful that you are there, and we are so appreciative of the efforts that you put forth on our behalf, because you have made a tremendous change in our country overall. I want to take a quick step back and talk about being the first black woman to sit on the city council at large. How proud of you were that, and what did that mean to you? What did that accomplishment mean to you personally? Were you able to appreciate that, and did that continue to grow your spirit?
Okay, let me say this. I did not run for the Boston City Council at large because I wanted to make history. I did run because I wanted to make a difference. I was running on a platform, which it feels weird to say that because it's really my value, that our girls that were at and proven risk were not getting the same attention as our boys that are at and proven risk. And I remember when I first was as a candidate talking about this agenda, and people would say, but it's our boys that are dying in the streets. And I would say, well, the girls are slowly dying right in front of you, but no one's talking about it. And we can fight for them both. The fact of the matter is, the city did not have, in my opinion, robust gender-specific and responsive programming and policies to meet the needs of girls and women. And when I said this is what I wanted to run on, and I was recruited to run, I have to be honest.
Okay.
I had not been in some corner calculatedly planning to run for anything. At that time, I was an aide for United States Senator John Kerry. I loved being the person behind the person. I found reward, purpose, and meaning in that. And then I was approached by some people that said, this is the year that a black woman gets elected to the Boston City Council. I said, great, where can I send a check? And they said, it's you. And I said, oh, hell no. Because I knew, having been so proximate to what it is to be an elected official, I knew the personal sacrifice. My mother had just gone into remission from CLL leukemia. I'm an only child. I was her caregiver. I just purchased my first home. I loved being an aide. But after a lot of prayer, meditation, reflection, they kept coming back to me. I raised my hand, I said yes. And it wasn't until I was really on that debate stage, and I think there were 15 candidates in the primary, and I was the only woman in the field. And then I started to have a greater appreciation for the significance of that. But I didn't run to be a first anything. I had a very specific sort of heart's work agenda that I wanted to advance. And there were many people whose rings they told me I had to kiss that I went and met with, who said, you should not be running for the Boston City Council. You want to fight for girls. You should go run a nonprofit. I'm glad that the thousands of people that voted for me in that first run affirmed that actually no, the work of championing girls and women is the work of city government, and they affirmed that. I also have to say, because this is Women's History Month, I'm the first black woman elected citywide. I'm not the first to run. And I want to acknowledge Jean McGuire.
Yes, okay, yes. Who ran for the school committee?
She ran for the school committee, and I also I did think she ran for. But the point is, there are many people not reflected in history who softened the ground with the electorate, with the consciousness of the people, resulting in my election in 2009. And so I just want to affirm that. And then, something I am proud of is that after getting elected to the Boston City Council, and then creating a new standing policy committee, which other municipalities replicated, the Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Communities. I'm proud of that. I didn't ask permission to lead. I didn't have to pursue an existing committee. I created my own. It was the first committee to name the issue of trauma as a priority. It was a committee focused not on access to healthcare services, but that sought to underscore that the health, the ecosystem, the health of the individual, the family, and the community are inextricably linked. And so creating that Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Communities that was replicated by other municipalities. And then I went on to be decisively reelected as the top vote getter in 3 elections. And then after serving for 2 terms as the only woman on that council, when you see the council that you see today, or that you have seen in recent years,
substantial change.
that is overwhelmingly women, overwhelmingly women of color. That is a testament to a concrete ceiling that was broken in my election in 2009. And I do see a sister in service, one of my siblings in the work of justice, Nika Elgaro, former state representative who's here. And I just want to acknowledge her because her election was also historic, and that was in the year of my first election to Congress that we saw so many historic victories. And it matters. When you have a diversity of perspective, opinion, and thought, you're ensuring that the issues that are called out are not monolithic. They're not homogenous, that they do reflect the citizenry. You can't have a government for and by the people if you don't have a government for and by the people.
Made up of the people.
It's really that simple. And then finally, I want to say this. Black women are often, they voice this label onto us of identity politics, as if that is a negative thing. Identity matters. I've never asked anyone to vote for me because I'm a black woman. There are many things that comprise my identity. Having been a caregiver to my mother in the final stages of her life, that's a huge part of my identity. Being a bonus mom and affirming that being a bonus mom counts for motherhood, too. Being a black woman, being a survivor of sexual assault, being the child of a formerly incarcerated parent. All of those things shape who I am. And my experiences are mine, but I don't have the monopoly on them. So that representation matters so that other people feel seen and heard and centered in the policies that we draft. So when people say black women are running on identity politics, I find it deeply offensive. When John F. Kennedy was elected as the first Irish Catholic president, the globe celebrated. So it's people pick and choose when identity.
What do you want to be proud of? What
when identity.
Whose identity
exactly.
are you welcoming into the system?
When it is a value, when it is essential.
Yes.
But every identity matters and should be reflected and represented around policy decision-making tables and the corridors of power.
Well, I want to thank you for what you do. I want to move on a little bit and talk about, and you mentioned it just a moment ago, and I mentioned in the intro, how you became the first representative for Congress as a black woman to represent Massachusetts, and how you were able to beat in the primary a longstanding senator who was also considered very liberal, Michael Capuano, and who had been receiving a great amount of support from the state. Do you think that your diverse life experience gave you an edge, or gave you the ability to be able to be identified or identify with more of the constituency? Do you think those multiple levels of experience made you a more receptive candidate for those in the larger Massachusetts?
Well, let me say this.
Yes, sir.
I ran for Congress because the district had changed, and I felt the needs of the district had changed. And my candidacy was just saying the district deserves a choice. And ultimately, God and the electorate will determine the rest. Now, a week out from that election day, the polls had me down by 13 points. And we won by decisive 17. And that is about the fact that I met everyone, as many people as I could, where they were. I made no assumptions about who desired and deserved a seat at the table of democracy. So I didn't just engage super voters. I engaged people who never voted. I engaged low propensity, infrequent voters. I made an appeal to everyone. And I only affirmed my vision and my candidacy. I did not speak negatively about the incumbent. And that is something that's important to me, just to make plain, because Mike Capuano was a good man and a good congressman. I was simply saying, the district deserved a choice. And I think ultimately the reason why I was successful is because, again, the district had changed in its demographics, the needs of the district had changed, we campaigned in ways that were disruptive and unconventional. I had 250 black men behind the walls of MCI Norfolk organizing their families on the outside. I had young people, as young as 14 years old, that were inspired to knock doors for me when it was hot as Hades. It was like walking the surface of the sun. But they felt a sense of agency and empowerment. And in fact, we grew the youth vote by 400% in that race. 26% of our voters, it was the first time they ever participated in a primary. We grew the Latino vote by 70%. And I think the black vote by something like 16%, I don't know. I see my current chief of staff, Sarah Grove, is my campaign manager here, so she's not gonna intervene here. But the point is, we really, we expanded the electorate, and that ultimately was why we were successful.
And I think that the surveys that estimated you 13 points behind failed to count all those new voters.
Exactly.
That's why the projections were so far off.
Well, and that's why
that's typical. That is typical.
Don't ride the polar coaster.
Yeah, don't ride the polar coaster.
Do not ride the polar coaster. The fact of the matter is you cannot poll transformation. And transformation was afoot in the Massachusetts 7th because, again, they were not engaged in the electorate that we were in real time expanding.
Got it. So once you got to Congress, you were considered a very progressive, as you've all been, a progressive Congresswoman, and you were a member of the squad, as they were labeled. I'm not sure if you like that label or not, but I know that you embraced the partnership with your fellow progressives. What did you learn being in your first couple of years as a Congresswoman while the Democrats were in power? What was that experience like?
So first, let me just say that I did not always identify as a progressive. It's been a very interesting thing being in Washington because when you have a national platform, people put you in boxes, in categories, and you're labeled in ways that I was not used to serving on the municipal level. And ultimately, I chose to embrace the progressive label and movement because I do believe we are still very much in the civil rights movement. And I believe the work of advancing progress is to disrupt an unjust status quo. That was the work of freedom fighters. That was the work of freedom riders. And that is the work in this moment that I seek to do in freedom work, in justice work, to disrupt an unjust status quo. And I will do that work anywhere, including within my own party. Mm-hmm. So when you ask me about my freshman term, in the same way that I campaigned in ways that were disruptive, I was governing in ways that were disruptive. Myself and Representative Ocasio-Cortez, we were the only members in that 116th class of the U.S. House of Representatives to have unseated incumbents. So it was a very unique walk. There were others who had made history running for open seats, including Representative Omar and Representative Tlaib. And of course, Representative Ocasio-Cortez was also at that time the youngest woman elected to Congress. We were the majority-making class, and it was the most representative congressional class in the history of Congress. Now, we were elected in the midst of a government shutdown. So I have been serving in Congress during some of the most consequential times, not just for the House of Representatives, to be a member of Congress, in the history of our country. I have served during multiple government shutdowns. I've served during 2 impeachments. I've served during an insurrection. I've served during a pandemic. I have served during 2 terms of a dictator. So these have been, some of the most consequential times, and people always ask me if I'm weary, if I'm growing cynical, how I'm doing, and I have two responses always. They don't change. First, I'm a black woman. I was built for this. So this is nothing I can't handle. It is literally a part of my ancestral DNA to do the work of truth-telling, of movement building, of reconstruction, which we will be doing on the other side of this. And I also say that the people who elected me are counting on me to stand in the gap. And though I admittedly do get weary, I don't have the luxury of being apathetic. I don't have the luxury of being cynical. And so I just continue to lead according to what my mother, may she rest in peace and power, expected of me, what the times require of me, and what the good people of the Massachusetts 7th elected me to do. Recognizing, as a black woman, we are all overwhelmingly assuming the role as canaries in the coal mine. And so because we call out things, because we see things, because we forecast things, that means that we are often vilified.
Of course.
We are often criminalized. And then when we do the work, because I love to do the work of consensus building. I don't do the work of consensus seeking. I do the work of consensus building, taking those issues like student debt cancellation, like extending Haiti TPS, like acknowledging the crisis that is the of unemployment for black women in this moment, and so many other issues that I can name, abolishing ICE. These are things that I've led on. And at the time, I would be considered radical. I would be considered fringe. But then when you do that hard work of consensus building and you bring everyone else along and it becomes the mainstream discourse, you're often erased from the narrative. And then
as if you weren't the person that brought them.
And then other people are credited with the victory. Now that has been something that black women have dealt with our whole lives, because we hold this very unique dichotomy. To be a black woman is to be hyper visible. So you are going to be targeted. You are going to be surveyed. You are going to be criminalized. You are going to be objectified. You are also hyper invisible. Your pain is denied. Your contributions delegitimized. You are often rendered a historical footnote or erased altogether. So just because I have earned a title does not inoculate me or exempt me from occupying that same painful dichotomy of being both hyper visible and hyper invisible.
I definitely get it. I definitely get it. And that is one of the biggest struggles that I know women in our society face, especially black women.
Absolutely.
But I want to talk about one of your most recent successes.
Okay.
Literally last Friday, it was announced that you were successful in getting 218 votes for the petition to force a floor vote for the 3-year extension of temporary TPS status for Haitian immigrants. So I want to applaud you on that. Congratulations. And to get that many votes, obviously there are a handful of Republicans who...
Well, let me explain. There hasn't been a vote yet. Okay, so let me explain. So given the dysfunction under this Republican majority, more recently you have heard the term discharge petition. These are normally used very rarely, but we have had to use the tool of discharge petition as a workaround to move legislation.
Because of the blocking of all the legislation.
Because of the dysfunction.
Dysfunction, okay.
The dysfunction and the chaos. And the people deserve a functional government. We're going to keep working until we get that. And this is, to me, bigger than Republican or Democrat. At this point, the tool of a discharge petition, I'm just appealing to any person of conscience on an issue of consequence that we are using the tool of discharge petition for.
And I understand this was the same tool that was used to force the floor vote on the Epstein files.
On the Epstein files, on the Affordable Care Act extension. Exactly. Now, it might seem like this is an easy thing. a discharge petition can only be signed when members are on the floor. That's the first thing. So it's not like a bill where you can just tell your staff, put me on it. The member has to physically be on the floor. Now, when we're in the well of the House chamber, you may not be able to tell on C-SPAN. First, we don't have assigned seats, okay? And no one is really, seated. You're moving about. You might be on the floor lobbying a member to sign on to a bill. You might be you're working, you're not just being still. And this is all happening with the clock ticking because you have to vote, right, as well. So those are the mechanics of it. And then you have to reach 218 signatures, so majority, in order to force a vote. And so we were able to organize a bipartisan coalition of people throughout the country that were lobbying their members of Congress to affirm the humanity, the dignity, and to fight for the safety of 350,000 Haitian nationals. Now, I co-chair the House Haiti Caucus. That's a caucus I actually resurrected that had grown dormant. So I co-chair the House Haiti Caucus, which is an honor because I represent the third largest Haitian diaspora in the country.
Behind New York and Florida, is it?
Correct.
New York and Florida.
Correct. Now, I love when people assume I'm Haitian because I'm fighting for Haitians. I'm just black mixed with black. I fight for the people of Haiti because they taught me everything about the work of resistance and rebellion and liberation. I fight for the people of Haiti because as a black woman, I owe the people of Haiti. I fight for the people of Haiti because if we are to say that Black Lives Matter, that must mean all black lives, from Haiti to the Sudan to Congo, and I could go on. So this is now a first step, and it is a testament to the broad coalition we organized. We phone banked, we knocked doors. Senator Markey and I did a field hearing in Mattapan at Jubilee Church. And that all built momentum and pressure. Because what I know is government doesn't always lead, but it does respond. And we kept pressure up, forcing people to respond and to be people of conscience. And so that included many members of the Democratic caucus, along with 4 Republicans. Now we move to a vote. Yes,
the big question is, how long do you think it will take before you are able to get to that vote?
Well, procedurally, a discharge petition, and also let me say this, because I got to give credit to my team and the coalition that we built around the country. There have only been 15 discharge petitions in the last 40 years to reach a 218 threshold. I have to say that. Only 15 in 40 years. So I think that bodes well for the integrity of this petition, the robustness of this movement, and procedurally, it needs 7 legislative days to ripen. So we are currently in a legislative recess. So I do anticipate when we return that we'll move to a vote. Those signatures will translate to votes, and I hope we'll earn even more. And then it goes to the Senate.
Well, we wish you the best of luck with that legislation. And congratulations.
Listen, it has to happen.
Congratulations.
Because deporting anyone to Haiti is a death sentence.
Death sentence right now, yes.
And these 350,000 Haitian nationals are our neighbors. They're valued members of our community. And I'm going to tell you, if this does not happen, it will decimate the healthcare industry. Most of your home care, health aides, providers, nurses are Haitian. It will decimate the construction industry. It will decimate the hospitality industry, and it will separate families. So we're fighting like hell.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I just want to remind everybody that we are here in GBH's News Feed Cafe with a live audience in the Boston Public Library. And our audience, you will see on your tables out there that if you would like to ask a question, or if you have a question for the Congresswoman, you can fill out the form straight over here. Sandra will take your question, and later on in the program, we will ask some of your questions. All righty. Well, thank you. I wanted to move on and talk about some of the other legislation that you've been championing lately.
Sure.
The Appraisal Modernization Act to promote equity and combat systemic bias in home appraisal process, which I know a lot about, and being a homeowner and a property owner for many years and watching what has happened in the industry around home ownership. Talk to us a little bit about that initiative and why it's so important to you.
Yeah, well, I serve on the Financial Services Committee. And as the Congresswoman representing the Massachusetts 7th, a district that is vibrant, diverse, dynamic, and one of the most unequal in our country, I remain very focused on addressing disparate outcomes, and that includes closing and hopefully eliminating the racial wealth gap. And we all know that Black home ownership is the lowest that it's been in 6 decades. And for those who are homeowners, we know that our homes are often not valued accurately, and that is because of the bias that exists in the appraisal system. So you can be a Black homeowner, live next door to your neighbor who is not Black and a homeowner, same neighborhood, and your homes and same quality caliber of home in terms of age or investments that have been made, and it'll be valued much less. And so what that means is that Black people are being robbed of billions of dollars in wealth. It impacts your ability to draw on the equity of that home. It impacts your wealth. And so my legislation in partnership with Senator Raphael Warnock, it has passed the Senate. I'm working hard to get it in a big housing bill that we hope to get before the House so that it passes there and then becomes law. But what this will do is for homeowners, Black homeowners who believe their home has not been valued according to its accurate value, it gives them a recourse to challenge that. And also, it would create a national database.
Yeah, I remember when I sold a home in the early 2000s, our realtor telling us that we had to remove the family photos and all of that if we wanted to get the maximum amount for that home for this very reason. And it's stunning to me to find out that that is still recommendations that many realtors give folks, even in this day and age. So I hope that legislation passes.
Pardon me.
Yes, and thank you for being here. I also want to talk about one of your other major initiatives, strengthening place-based access and resources and acknowledge, it's known as SPARK, so there's a lot of words in here, but basically the SPARK program spurs entrepreneurship and increases access to underserved entrepreneurs and helps them to identify resources and identify funding.
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about that project.
Well, you heard me mention earlier that one of the issues that I'm working on is the unemployment crisis for Black workers.
And Black women in particular, because of once this administration removed all those federal jobs, disproportionate amount of those new unemployed people are Black.
Oh yeah, let me walk folks through it. The federal government, 12% of those jobs have been held by Black women. And so what that means is that if you submit a FAFSA application to the Department of Education, it was likely a Black woman processing that. What that means is if you have benefited from the enforcement of national fair housing laws at Housing and Urban Development at HUD, it was likely a Black woman lawyer doing that. If your grandmother was the victim of some predatory financial product and got justice through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, it was likely because of a Black woman. And I could go on. Black women have dominated Department of Education, Housing and Urban Development, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, USAID, Health and Human Services. So Black women, in the same way that Black girls are disproportionately pushed out of the classroom, Black women have been pushed out of the federal workforce. And is that Aziza? Hey, sis. Reparations now. In the same way that Black women have been disproportionately pushed out of, so Black women have been pushed out of the federal workforce, but also because of the dismantling, the degrading, and defunding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, Black women in the private sector who have dominated those positions when it comes to DEI have also been pushed out. And so I'm calling on the Federal Reserve to do their job. They have a mandate, a statutory mandate of maximum employment. So I'm demanding that they analyze the data and come up up with a plan, because this is a crisis for Black women, Black families, and Black futures, when 70% of Black women are the primary breadwinner in their households. So this is devastating, and this is a canary in the coal mine issue. Whereas unemployment for the country is a little over 4%, but for Black workers in general is over 6%, and for Black women is at 7%. And so what we're saying is that if a crisis of this magnitude was occurring for anyone else, you would have a plan. So you need to make this a priority.
As is often said, if America gets a cold, the Black community gets the flu.
Pneumonia. And what I've said to them is, I'm not appealing to you out of benevolence. I want you to just do your damn job, but also know that this hurt is coming for everyone. Black women are bearing the brunt because we always do, but this harm is coming for everyone. So if you study this, if you come up with a plan, you're going to be able to apply that for everyone. Now, how does that connect to my legislation, the Spark Act, which would provide robust grant funding for incubators to support small businesses? Well, one, a lot of Black women are having to pivot in this moment. And so businesses owned, small businesses, micro businesses owned by Black women, owned by people of color, remain the fastest growing small businesses. But you know, we continue to struggle with access to capital. And so this is why it's important to have this legislation that would invest in those incubators to support our small businesses in scaling up and in their growth. And those grants would be as high as $500,000. And again, grants, not loans, because as I've worked closely with organizations like the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, you know, we continue to hear how what people need are not loans they have to pay back. They need grants. And because of the lack of equitable access to capital, despite the critical role that these small businesses play in our economy, it is important that these sorts of federal investments are made.
That is a wonderful, wonderful project. And those types of grants, being a newly 3-year into ownership of the Bay State Banner, I'm familiar with those challenges as an entrepreneur. So a $500,000 funding grant would be helpful to all businesses, especially businesses that are under attack or in an environment that's very tough.
Yes, historically underserved. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What are some of the other things that we haven't talked about that are on your agenda nationally that you've been presenting?
Well, I do justice work, so I'll work on all of it.
Okay.
But what else could I speak to? In the housing space, I have some bills that are currently moving through the House. One is the HELP Act. This would establish a national legal counsel line through HUD to stave off evictions, because what we find is a lot of people are being unlawfully evicted because they don't know their rights. And so the HELP Act would ensure that they have access to counsel and representation. Also, my efforts to abolish qualified immunity for federal law enforcement, which I think is very important in this climate where we have masked rogue agents who are moving in ways that are rogue, racist, unlawful, and unconstitutional. People are being injured, people are losing their lives. Just 2 days ago, I eulogized Emmanuel Damas, a Haitian migrant who lost his life because of medical neglect while in the custody of ICE. He had a toothache. They didn't take it seriously. They didn't treat that. That toothache was an infection that became sepsis, shutting his whole body down, and he died. And so we need to pass by legislation the Qualified Immunity Abolition Act, because although there can never be justice for the Damas family, there must be accountability. And families need a path to recourse and accountability. And that's why we have to do away with the unjust legal doctrine that is qualified immunity. When a doctor causes harm, there's medical malpractice. If a lawyer doesn't do right by you, there's a recourse for that.
And a job as physically damaging or potentially damaging as a law enforcement, where you can abuse people's rights to such a degree, it's almost inconceivable that they would have unqualified immunity. Just the concept of that seems to be antithetical to our American sense of justice. So I
Absolutely.
hope that we're
Everyone
able to
should be
move that.
held accountable.
I see we do have a question
Okay.
from the audience. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself and then read your question for the Congresswoman?
Yes, thank you. I'm Priscilla Douglas, and I'm the former chair of the Board of Trustees for the Boston Public
Yes,
Library.
you are.
Yeah. Hi, Priscilla.
I know words are important to you, and we appreciate the way you break things down and your eloquence. On the other side, we hear, I don't care. I'm glad he's dead. What is that rhetoric doing to our country?
Well, dangerous rhetoric, as this administration has proven, very often becomes violent and dangerous policies. And so that's why we can't be dismissive of rhetoric, and we can't normalize these things, and we have to call it out every time. This is why I am vigilant in calling out anti-blackness and naming it. This moment right now, we are experiencing a coordinated, unrelenting assault on Black people, on Black bodies, on Black votes, on Black power, on Black progress. And we have to call it out. You know what I think? I think that Black people, it has become a conflated part of our definition in the consciousness of the country. So much Black suffering that it's unremarkable to people. So that's why it's important for me to not just name that this administration is anti-immigrant, anti-woman, anti-science, anti-LGBTQ, anti-freedom, but to name anti-Blackness so that we don't normalize it and we call it out every time. So the rhetoric is damning, it is dangerous, and it has resulted in dangerous and violent policies that are causing a lot of harm. And that's why we can't normalize it. You have to call it out every single time. You have to condemn it and do so vigorously.
Words matter. Words matter. Thank you. We have another question from our audience. Please introduce yourself and state your question.
So my name is Alan Tanner. I am a member of the Boston People's Reparations Commission, and I also serve as an executive assistant with Healing Our Land Incorporated. And my question is, as it regards to HR 40, what is the current status of HR 40, and is there anything at a grassroots level that can be done to advance HR 40? And then it's a twofold question. The second piece of it is there anything that within HR 40 that mandates action to come out of the study that's created from the commission within HR 40?
Now,
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, Congresswoman, just to clarify for those at home what HR 40 is in short, so folks can understand what.
Okay, really quick, and I want to just hold space for, this is hard to do this quickly. Okay, HR 40, look, it's a reparations bill.
Okay.
It's a study, it would establish a commission to study forms of reparation. And to your point, in terms of enforcement, and I'm making this so little, I can't unpack it all.
It's a longer.
I know, but it's so hard. Okay, first let me just say this. I have to acknowledge former state senator who's an ancestor now, Bill Owens, who wrote the first reparations bill in the country for a state legislature. That legislation became foundational to the bill that Congressman John Conyers, may he rest in peace and power, that he went on to introduce. After John Conyers left Congress, Sheila Jackson Lee, may she rest in peace and power, picked that mantle up. And I was very humbled that her family then came to me and said, we would like for you to pick this up. And so the status of HR 40, which I reintroduced under Trump, which people thought was crazy, because they said this isn't going to go anywhere. And I said, listen, there's momentum throughout the country because of the strength of this movement for decades. We have task force. We have states that have actively moved reparations and are doing reparative investments. There's so much progress and momentum, and I don't want to see that stalled. And I said, if this administration is anti-Blackness on steroids, all the more reason for us to be unapologetically pro-Black. And that is why I reintroduced HR 40 under this second Trump administration. So far as grassroots efforts, I know there's a meeting that we're working on actually right now for this week, so I can connect with the local task force people here that are doing that work, both in Boston and Cambridge, more specifically. It's a national movement. It's a huge movement, and there are many legislative efforts, both in state houses and, of course, in Congress. The status of H.R. 40 right now is what we're doing is still building the co-sponsors. I know people are frustrated because things feel stalled. We've been in this fight for a long time, but you have to acknowledge the progress. We had a hearing just in the last 3 years in the Judiciary Committee on H.R. 40. We had the most votes, co-sponsors for H.R. 40 in the history of H.R. 40. And so momentum is building. We are close. I think the actions of the UN, thank you, Ghana, although I don't understand why anyone would not support that resolution that acknowledges the trauma of chattel slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, rather. But the point is, I know we're trying to get through a lot of questions, so I'm trying to sum this up. But shout out to Bill Owens, John Conyers, Sheila Jackson-Lee. I'm very proud to take that mantle up and to do that work in partnership and in coalition with people right here in the Massachusetts 7th. The work continues. Okay.
Thank you.
To your question, there is appropriating language in H.R. 40. So that means that this isn't a suggestion. Okay.
That once it passes, they will be required to take action.
Exactly.
And the funds will be
There's appropriated language, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Language.
So our time is drawing near to a close, but I wanted to ask you, what is your call to action to all of those conscious folks in our community who want to support and help to produce a better country? What is your call to action for those in our community and in every community that want to stand up for the rights of all Americans?
Well, my call to action is that you have to act. I think, look, I don't think this is about how to survive the next 3 years of a Trump administration. I believe in this moment we are determining the next 100 years. Mm-hmm. So you all can't leave that work just to 212 members of a Democratic caucus, or you can't just leave that work to elected officials. This is not the time for just call-ins and call-outs. This is the time for you to bring your gift to the resistance, whatever that is, right? So for example, I might be the one delivering the speech, but maybe you're a hell of an editor and you helped me in that regard. Maybe I'm on the microphone and you made sure the microphone works. Maybe while I was leading that march and holding a sign, you were the artist that created that sign. Maybe I'm singing a song, a freedom song that you wrote. Maybe I'm fueled for that march by a lunch that you made, that nourished me. Or maybe I'm safe because of a prayer that you sent up. You don't have to be a congresswoman. All you have to do is bring your gift to the resistance, but you must bring it, because in this moment, we are determining the next 100 years. And finally, having returned from Minneapolis, where I thought was going to be ground zero for trauma, but ended up being ground zero for a template for the work of keeping one another safe. As marginalized people, we know how to do that, and we need to tap into that. Get to know your neighbors. This is a time for radical mutual aid, and you can't do that if you don't know your neighbors, because these are not unprecedented times. These are unprecedented times in our lifetime, but not unprecedented times for the history of the world. You have to meet these unprecedented times with unprecedented agitating, organizing, mobilizing, radical love, mutual aid, and hope.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for those wonderful words of support and words of encouragement to our community. As we round out our Women's History Month celebration, we must remember the mothers, the sisters, the daughters, the co-workers, and the friends who navigate a society that continues to discriminate against them for just being who they are. Though much progress has been made over the last half century, women still face staggering inequities in employment, healthcare, and many other basic rights we as men take for granted. So as we look towards the 250th anniversary of our nation, let us focus on correcting these injustices this nation has so long inflicted on half of our society. We must stand up for the women and girls in our society. We must stand up for the rights and freedoms of all Americans, irregardless as to any of the things that make us different. We are all in this together. We are the change we are looking for. We must work together to make this country a better country. So I want to thank all of you for being here today in our audience. I want to encourage you to join us here next month on April 9th for our program focusing on community sports and supporting our children in community sports. I also want to thank, of course, our wonderful guest, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, for joining me in the celebration of Women's History Month.
Thank you.
I also want to celebrate our wonderful crew from GBH who support us in all of our productions here. Juan Jose Candelas, Maggie Greer, Stephen Buscemi, and as well as the wonderful producing staff of Sandra Lopez-Burke and Lauren Herbert. Thank you so much. I also want to thank my Bay State Banner staff and all the folks from the Bay State Banner. I'm your host, Ronald Mitchell, editor and publisher of New England's Bay State Banner. You can read the Bay State Banner at baystatebanner.com or any one of 400 drop sites all over the state of Massachusetts. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.